Hi, Steve and Caleb from Brownells here with another edition of Smyth Busters. And today we're going to look at that old myth, the slide stop on an automatic pistol. Do you use that or do you use the slingshot technique?
So this is one that was requested by viewers from our last video, and it's one that I've actually ran into in the past. I guess I just kind of blocked it out of my mind because it was so ridiculous, but that kind of brought it all back. So the myth is that the slide catch or slide stop or slide release or whatever you want to call it, you shouldn't use it. It's just there to manually lock your slide back, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And the myth is that I've heard, so for example, let me back up a bit. When I was gunsmithing in South Louisiana, this guy came in and he dropped off his handgun, and I was manipulating it, function checking, doing things like that. And whenever I hit the slide release or slide catch, or again, whatever you want to call it, he looked me dead in the eyes, the window to my soul, Steve, and told me that that was going to damage the gun.
Sure it is.
So, and it's ridiculous. So, for example, look at this Browning high power. You can even see a little bit of discoloration in the slide catch area because that's where they hardened the steel. And this was a pretty good re-blue job, so you can't really tell, but on some of them you can, a lot of the re-blues. It's made, that lever there, it's a slide release lever. That's made to release the slide. That's why most of your semi-automatic handguns are knurled on top, so you can release it, hit it with your thumb.
That's the idea, yeah. Now they call it slide stops, slide releases, depending on which company it is and what their tradition is.
All the same stuff.
I use it as a slide release on my 1911s, my high powers, my Glocks, what have you. That's just the way I've trained, and that's the way I do it. And maybe that's another thing you should address is you do whatever you train to do, because that's what you're going to do under stress.
Right. So the other half of this myth is you shouldn't use it in basically any stressful situation or anything like that, because they say, and this is the thing that drives me kind of crazy the most, that hitting that slide release is a fine motor skill, and you're not going to have any fine motor skills in a stressful situation. What's hitting the magazine release button?
Right.
That's a fine motor skill. Pulling the trigger, that's a fine motor skill. So it's all going to come down to muscle memory in those stressful situations. If you like to slingshot it, fine. If that's what you train to do, do it that way. That's what you're going to be most proficient with. If you train hitting the button, you're going to be proficient at it because you're going to be using muscle memory.
Right. So go with what you're trained with. I mean, there really is no right or wrong on this. It's not going to hurt the gun either way.
Nope.
I mean, it cycles much more violently just from the act of shooting than it is just hitting that slide button and lowering the slide. No big deal. Any well-built gun, you're never going to see the difference.
Exactly.
So there really is no myth there.
Not really, no. And I'm surprised. So the reason we're addressing this is because there's a lot of new shooters, and I've even heard firearm trainers say this stuff. Of course, they're trainers we've never heard of, but they're certified trainers nonetheless. And they're telling these new shooters not to use that button.
Right, but
you can use it.
Sure, and they're trying to teach them a way. You know, they're making them slingshot it because that's something everybody can do, and it'll always work under pressure. Yeah. And they're imagining the worst for their students, I suppose. So, you know, it's not a bad way to train.
Yeah, so exactly. There's no right or wrong here, but the myth is that it's going to hurt your gun. It's not going to hurt your gun.
So, you say slingshot, I say slide stop, it's all good. They both work. Do what you train to do, and you'll be fine. Will not hurt the gun. That myth is pretty much busted if it ever existed in the first place. In the meantime, if you have any myths you'd like us to look at, leave us a comment. We'll be glad to look into it for you. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time with another edition of Smyth Busters.